Salisbury Convention effectively over now that we've got a coalition government?
I think the film's right. It's very difficult because if you're agreeing after the election what your policies are, then it's very hard to bind people in advance of that in terms of the Lords. But I think, look, to be honest, the Liberals have got a problem in the Commons as well, because they fought their election on a manifesto which said they wouldn't cut spending now, and they're now going to do that. It seems. In the discussions we had with the Liberals, there were certain issues which they said were very important. Heathrow runway, Trident, which we said we would look at, but there was also an issue of education spending for the next 3 years, where David Law said, in terms, with Danny Alexander there, the Conservatives had promised to match our spending for 3 years and put the pupil premium on top of that. And as far as we know, that's already been dropped in the last week by the new coalition. They're even breaking the promises that they made after the election, let alone before.
Right, well let me just ask you, you chose to focus on spending there. Since the election we've had the sort of trauma in Greece. We've seen austerity measures being taken in Portugal, in Spain, in France. And you still say, no, everything's fine, we mustn't cut anything this year.
I think what's happening in Europe is a really, really dangerous and big mistake. I think the idea of the large...
everyone in Europe's got it right, everyone in Europe's got it wrong, this government's got it wrong, UN boards have got it right.
Look, to be honest, I think the idea that the German finance ministry's prescription for small countries, which is radical and big spending cuts now, is the right prescription, is out of step with world opinion. And I have to say that the idea that you would put at risk the recovery now, if you look at David Cameron's interview today in the Sunday Times, he's saying big spending cuts now. He's also now raising the prospect of a rise in VAT, which I think would be quite wrong. I can't think of anything which would be more damaging to growth and jobs and public services. I think it's wrong to be doing that in the rest of Europe. But the idea that in Britain, the Liberals and the Conservatives are following that North European prescription, I think it's really, really risky.
Kelvin?
We just sailed through, thanks to your late governments, we just sailed through the 800 billion of debt mark. It happened, I think, at 2:17 last Thursday. Okay? Are you honestly saying to this country that we can carry on printing money, we can carry on borrowing money? Cameron made a good point in that same Sunday Times article. What he said was, actually, all the money that we're generating in this country is going in the interest rates, on the interest that we have to pay people on that 800 billion. Ed, you know as well as I do, we can't carry on like that.
But do you think a rise in VAT now would be fair?
We have got to, where are we going to get the money from?
I'd rather you weren't asking the question. I prefer if you just
He's a journalist. He's an FT journalist.
Look, we made the Bank of England independent, a tough decision opposed by the Conservatives. We also took decisions early on to get the national debt down to lower levels than France, Germany, Italy or Japan. We then went through a worldwide downturn because of this global financial mess in which actually we made the right calls on the banks, on stimulating the economy, calls which were opposed by David Cameron, who now says cut spending now.
You're so right that we're in the biggest... By the way, the interesting point is that had we joined the euro, by the way, had we joined the euro, we would have exploded the currency. It was fantastic. You are in bigger trouble. We are in bigger trouble because of your government. Somebody's got to sort it out.
Kelvin,
somebody's got to sort it out. You did.
Kelvin,
you gave it to us.
I'm sorry, Kelvin, you know that we didn't join the euro, despite the advice of the FT and the Economist, because I fought the case saying that Britain couldn't survive.
I just want to...
It was a good call. Bank of Independence was a good call. Getting the national debt down was a good call. Saving the banks and stopping that crucifying our economy was a good call. And to be honest, John, the idea of spending cuts now, it may be what Germany's telling Greece is the right thing to do. I think it is profoundly misguided. I think for David Cameron and Nick Clegg, look, even Margaret Thatcher in 1980 didn't cut public spending in the year we came out of the...
Ed Balls, look, I want to... You talk about the right calls that you made. Look, what about the wrong calls that you made? And you're talking... your article, I think, in one of the papers today about the wrong calls that you've made over immigration. What did you do wrong?
I think, look, in 2004 and 2003, we looked really hard at the economic evidence on the euro and decided not to join. We didn't really look in the same disciplined, hard-headed way at the issue of transitional arrangements for the new countries coming into Europe. In retrospect...
Whose fault was that?
Well, look, I think it was the government's fault. It was a combination of the Treasury, the Foreign Office, the Home Office, and it's right as politicians we put our hands up and say we didn't get it all right. But the reality is...
You seem to be quite good at finding things you've done wrong sort of latterly. I mean, you know, now you're saying you were wrong on the transitional arrangements, you're saying you were wrong on Iraq. Didn't hear a peep out of you at the time.
now, and Cameron, Clegg, the leadership candidates, everyone is, but the question I think you should answer, Ed, is this. Gordon Brown, during the election campaign, did the famous bigot gate gaffe with Gillian Duffy. You're all now turning around and saying that was Gordon's mistake. It wasn't Labour's whole mistake, it was the whole Labour Party, wasn't it, that would not talk about immigration, because the minute anyone mentioned it was, oh, racist. And now everyone's turning around in a complete 180-degree turn saying, oh, it's all about immigration.
I was attacked by the Daily Mail before the general election for raising the immigration issue. I had 5 public meetings in my constituency in the last year and a half on immigration. And it was clear, look, this was a constituency where the BNP say they've got the largest membership in the country. I thought the BNP really, really hard. I hate their racist views.
But no one was closer to Brown than you, so why didn't you tell him that?
But let me answer
Did you ever tell him? Did you ever tell him?
I said to him...
I want to ask that question. Did you ever tell him that he was wrong on that?
On immigration, to him that he should be talking about immigration in the last year and a half, and that we were making a mistake by brushing it under the carpet. And to be honest, I think Gordon's answer to Mrs Duffy showed he'd not been having the conversation, because what she said was the kind of things being said by Labour supporters, and in some cases former Labour supporters, over the last year and a half, which is, look, we're not racist, and we support our EU membership, and we know that immigration is important to the NHS, but look what it's doing to my community, to my child's job prospects, to our housing queues.
I just want to clarify a few things with you, if we may, about this. So, I mean, for example, Turkey. You support Turkish membership, but you just don't want Turks to come to Britain. Is that roughly right?
No. No, and that's not what the article says. What the article says is...
Where am I wrong?
Right, I support Turkey joining the EU for economic and political reasons. And it's quite a big thing to say that, because in France they're debating whether Turkey should be in or not. But the kind of transitional arrangements on Labour, which we should have done to Poland and other AA countries in 2004, we absolutely must do for a sustained period, because if not, the movement of unskilled Turkish labour across Europe will be so destabilising in our communities that we will not sustain political and economic support for the European Union going on. So the hard-headed view says, if you believe in European integration and you want to have the mobility of labour, the free mobility of unskilled labour is not sustainable for communities like the one I represent.
And I just want to know whether your reasons for this are economic or social-cultural. I.e., do you think that an influx of unskilled Muslim workers will destabilise relations in this country and lead to a rise in racism? Is that the problem?
But if you look today, I've been supported by Marsha Singh from Bradford and Khaled Mahmood from Birmingham. In their communities too, people say that immigration's been really important for the diversity of our society. But there is an economic impact on the wages, terms and conditions. For the long term, we must get skills into these communities and houses.
But is there a social cultural aspect to this?
Well, see, to be honest, I think that this is a common view across different ethnic groups and different communities.
I'm asking your view. I'm asking your view. I'm asking your view. Do you think there is a danger of social and cultural unrest if there was a sudden influx of a lot of unskilled Muslim Turkish workers?
Look, the issue I've raised is Eastern European workers coming from Poland. It is not a race issue at all, and to be honest, I think it's really arrogant of us to start saying it's a race issue, that Mrs Duffy was raising a race point. She wasn't. She was talking about jobs and wages and the protections in her community and houses and tuition fees. It is not a race issue. People in my constituency who don't vote BNP are not racist, but they are concerned. And if we don't, as a Labour Party and as a country, respond to those concerns in skills, in housing, but also in the way in which we manage migration from Eastern Europe, then we will pay a very heavy price, because what will happen in the end is that those people who want to come at this from a race issue will use it and exploit it.
And what do you say to the former Europe Minister, your parliamentary colleague Dennis McShane, who tweeted this morning, oh dear, does Labour leadership have to end up into a contest on who can beat up most on immigrants, foreigners, following your article?
That is the danger, isn't it? Because everyone's doing it in the leadership campaign now, and it is, as you say, who could be the toughest on immigration. And I know your motives are right, but the danger is that those whose motives are not so noble, shall we say, are going to use this as an excuse to stir up.
But you can't say to us both, we've got to get it, to understand, to respond, and then say when we are willing to come out and talk about difficult issues, there's a danger of being misinterpreted. I spoke to Shahid Malik in Dewsbury this morning. He says it was exactly the same issue in Dewsbury. This is not an issue of race, and it must not be seen in that way. Dennis